There's an empire that fought wars for 600 years straight. Not 6 months, not 6 years. 6 centuries. They battled crusaders, European kings, Persian sultans, Egyptian armies, rebel forces, and every rising power that wanted a piece of them. They fought from Vienna to Yemen, from the Balkans to Baghdad, from Hungary to the Red Sea. And through all of that, through 600 years of non-stop conflict, they didn't go bankrupt. Most empires collapse under the weight of war. Spain went broke fighting endless battles. France nearly bankrupted itself multiple times. Even Rome, the greatest military machine in history, eventually couldn't afford its own army. But the Ottoman Empire? They found a way to make war pay for itself. And today, we're breaking down exactly how they did it. Because this isn't just ancient history. The financial systems they built are still being used today by modern governments and militaries. You just don't recognize them yet. Let's get into it. Before we talk about how the Ottomans survived, we need to understand why most empires die. And it's not because they lose battles. Battles don't bankrupt nations. Budgets do. Think about it. War is expensive. You need soldiers. You need to feed them, equip them, pay them, transport them, house them, treat their wounds. And you need to do all of that while also running your country, building roads, collecting taxes, keeping the peace. Most empires can afford war for a few years, maybe a decade if they're lucky. But 600 years? That's impossible. Unless you build a system where war doesn't drain you, where war actually funds itself. And that's exactly what the Ottomans did. They didn't just fight wars. They engineered a financial machine that turned conquest into cash flow. But to understand how, we need to go back to the beginning, to a small group of warriors in Anatolia who figured out something no one else had. The Ottoman Empire started small, a frontier tribe led by a guy named Osman in the early 1300s. They weren't special. They weren't the strongest. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time. The Byzantine Empire was crumbling. The Mongols were pulling back. And there was a power vacuum in the middle. Osman and his followers moved in. But here's what made them different from every other warlord trying to grab territory. They realized something critical. Every time you conquer new land, you don't just get territory. You get taxpayers. You get farmers, merchants, craftsmen, towns, cities, trade routes. You get an income stream. So from day one, the Ottomans saw warfare differently. It wasn't a cost. It was an investment. Win a battle, gain new land, collect new taxes. Use those taxes to fund the next campaign. Repeat. By the time they captured Bursa in 1326 and crossed into Europe in the 1350s, they weren't a tribe anymore. They were a rising empire, controlling the most valuable real estate on earth. The crossroads between Europe and Asia. Every merchant traveling from Venice to Persia passed through Ottoman territory, paid Ottoman tolls. Every caravan moving silk from China or spices from India, Ottoman taxes. This is the first key to their success. Geography gave them cash flow, and cash flow gave them the ability to fight forever. But revenue alone doesn't explain 600 years, because lots of empires had money, and most still went broke. What made the Ottomans different was how they paid their army. Yo, real quick, if you're realizing this is way deeper than what you learned in school, hit that subscribe button right now. We break down the real history, the financial systems, the strategies empires use that governments still use today. New videos every week. Turn on notifications. Alright, let's keep going, because this next part is genius. Here's the problem every empire faces. Armies are expensive. You have to pay soldiers. And if you run out of money, your soldiers leave. Or worse, they turn on you. European kings dealt with this by hiring knights and mercenaries. But knights were expensive, and mercenaries only fought as long as you kept paying. The Ottomans looked at this problem and said, what if we just didn't pay soldiers? And they came up with one of the most brilliant financial systems in history, the timar system. Here's how it worked. Instead of paying a soldier with money, you gave him the right to collect taxes from a specific region. Let's say you're a cavalryman, a sepi. The Sultan gives you a village. You're now responsible for collecting taxes from that village. In exchange, you have to show up for war whenever called, fully equipped, with your own horse, your own armor, your own weapons. You fund yourself. Think about the genius of this. The government doesn't have to pay you a salary. You're not draining the treasury. You're funding yourself through local taxes. And because you depend on those taxes, you make sure the village stays stable and productive. Because if the village falls apart, so does your income. It's a self-regulating system. The soldiers invested in local peace. The peasants have a predictable authority. The state doesn't pay a penny in salaries. And most importantly, this system works during peacetime and wartime. European armies had to be assembled and paid when war started. The Ottomans already had an army ready to go. Always funded, always equipped. War didn't strain the budget. It activated the system. This is how they maintained a massive cavalry force for centuries without bankrupting themselves. But cavalry alone doesn't win wars. You also need infantry, elite troops, shock forces. And for that, the Ottomans created something even more controversial. If you've heard of the Ottoman Empire, you've heard of the Janissaries, elite infantry, feared across Europe, loyal only to the Sultan. But what most people don't know is how they were funded. The Janissaries came from something called the devshirme, the child levy. Here's how it worked. Every few years, Ottoman officials would go through Christian villages in the Balkans. They'd select young boys, remove them from their families, convert them to Islam, and train them from childhood to be soldiers. Now let's be clear, this was harsh. This was coercive. We're not romanticizing it. But financially, it was genius. Think about the cost of raising a soldier. You have to feed them for 18 years. Clothe them, educate them, train them. That's expensive. The Ottomans outsourced the cost to the conquered populations. The families raised the kids, fed them, kept them alive. Then the state took them as teenagers and trained them into elite soldiers. The empire got fully formed warriors without paying the cost of raising children to adulthood. And once they entered service, the Janissaries were paid. But they were also prohibited from marrying or owning businesses in their early years, which kept them loyal to the state alone. If the timar system made the cavalry self-funding, the Janissaries made the infantry cheap to acquire. Combined, the Ottomans had a military that cost a fraction of what European armies cost. And that's how they sustained warfare for 6 centuries. But there's another piece to this. Because maintaining an army is one thing, expanding is another. And the Ottomans figured out how to make expansion pay for itself too. Here's the cycle that kept the Ottoman Empire going. Conquer new territory, gain new taxpayers, use those taxes to fund the next war. Repeat. Every conquest made the empire richer. Every new province meant new trade routes, new ports, new resources. A European king might win a war and come home poorer because of the cost. The Ottomans came home richer. Think about the geography. They controlled the Bosporus, the Dardanelles, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the land routes between Europe and Asia. If you wanted to move goods between continents, you paid the Ottomans. Silk from China? Ottoman tolls. Spices from India? Ottoman taxes. Carpets from Persia? Ottoman fees. Every merchant, every caravan, every ship passing through their territory paid them. This made them one of the wealthiest states on earth by the 1500s. And they doubled down on this with state monopolies. Salt, tobacco, coffee, soap. Essential goods that everyone needed. The state controlled them. The state set the prices. The state collected the profits. It's the same strategy modern governments use today. Oil in Saudi Arabia, gas in Russia. Strategic industries controlled by the state for guaranteed revenue. The Ottomans invented this playbook 500 years ago. And they added one more layer, tribute. They didn't need to conquer and directly govern every region. Some places just paid annual tribute in exchange for protection or autonomy. Crimea, Wallachia, parts of Eastern Europe. It was cheaper than governing. And the income funded more soldiers, more campaigns, more expansion. This is the engine that kept them going. War funded by trade. Trade protected by war. Expansion creating more trade funding more war. A self-sustaining cycle that lasted centuries. Until it didn't. By the late 1600s and 1700s, the world changed. European powers industrialized. Their technology improved. Their navies dominated the oceans. And suddenly, trade routes shifted. Instead of caravans moving through Ottoman land, European ships sailed around Africa and directly to Asia. The Ottoman toll booth became irrelevant. At the same time, the timar system started breaking down. Local tax holders became corrupt. They abused their power. Soldiers became unreliable. Central control weakened. And the Janissaries, once the elite force, became a problem. Over the centuries, they gained political power. They became wealthy. They resisted reform. They drained the treasury. They went from being the solution to being the obstacle. And when the empire finally tried to modernize and adopt European-style armies, they ran into a problem they'd avoided for centuries. They needed to pay soldiers in cash. And to get cash, they needed to borrow. In the 1800s, the Ottoman Empire started taking loans from European banks at high interest rates. The same European powers they once dominated now controlled their finances. Debt spiraled. Payments fell behind. In 1881, the empire was forced to hand control of its finances to an international commission run by France and Britain. It was over. The financial independence that sustained them for 600 years was gone. And within decades, so was the empire. So what's the lesson here? Empires don't die on the battlefield. They die on the balance sheet. The Ottomans survived 6 centuries because they built a financial system that made war profitable. They collapsed when that system broke, when expansion stopped paying, when trade routes shifted, when soldiers became expensive, when they borrowed too much. And here's the thing, the same patterns still exist today. The timar system? That's modern military contracting. Governments outsource huge parts of their military operations to private companies to reduce payroll costs. Trade tolls? That's control over shipping lanes. The Strait of Hormuz, the South China Sea. Whoever controls the choke point controls the money. State monopolies? That's national oil companies, sovereign wealth funds. Saudi Aramco is just the Ottoman salt monopoly on a trillion-dollar scale. Conquest paying for war? That's resource-driven conflicts. Countries fight for oil, minerals, pipelines, strategic territory. And late-stage borrowing? That's national debt crises. Countries fund deficits with loans until the system collapses. Argentina, Greece, even the US debt situation. The financial logic of empire doesn't change, just the uniforms. And the warning beneath all of this is simple. Financial systems can sustain power for centuries, until the day they can't. The moment expansion stops funding itself, the moment trade routes shift, the moment borrowing becomes unsustainable, the whole thing collapses. The Ottomans learned this the hard way, and every empire since has repeated the same mistake. Alright, let's wrap this up. The Ottoman Empire fought wars for 600 years because they built a financial machine that made war pay for itself. They didn't pay soldiers in cash. They gave them tax rights. They didn't raise elite infantry from birth. They took them as teenagers and trained them. They didn't conquer for glory. They conquered for trade routes and tax revenue. And they sustained it all by making every expansion fund the next one. It worked until it didn't, until the world changed, until their financial edge disappeared. And then they collapsed like every empire before them. The lesson? War isn't won by the strongest army. It's won by whoever can afford to keep fighting. And the Ottomans understood that better than almost anyone in history. So pay attention, because the same systems they used are still running today. You just call them something else. And yo, before you go, make sure you check out the next video on the screen. We're breaking down another empire that figured out how to dominate through money, not muscle. Click it, watch it, learn from it. I'll see you there.